And we're with Mr. Kai Dotiwala. You had something to say about solar energy.
Yes, I was talking about United States keeping or taking its leadership in the alternative energy field. But at the same time, we have to realize that we are competing against the whole world. And if we curb down our industry and our businesses with a lot of regulation and over-regulation, we won't be able to do it. For example, they say that China today is going to take a leadership role in the whole solar energy field because it's going to be able to manufacture the solar panels at a much cheaper rate because of the labor costs, etc., and be able to bring it into the Western world. So we need to, when you're talking about regulating industry, we need to make sure that we balance regulations for the good of humanity with keeping our leadership role always in front of our eyes, because otherwise we are going to end up being something that we may not want to be. The countries are doing a lot of things for sustainable environmental solutions. For example, the Port of Houston is the first port in the United States or the world which is ISO 14001 certified, which means that it is an international environmental certification that it has achieved. And there are a lot of other industries doing that. So when you are shooting for regulation, keep that in mind, please.
But I think that regulation is an essential element of being able to go forward from today. What happened in the Gulf of Mexico, I think, is a perfect example of why we need better regulation. What's happened with some of the Barnett Shale examples up in North Texas is a perfect example of why we need better air quality regulations as well as public protection regulations for groundwater. So that's what I'm talking about, is that there does need to be a balance, but there needs to be a balance that protects the environment as well as an economic.
And to get back to what you were saying earlier about stop global whining, that's exactly why we don't have those regulations. They need to be thoughtful, they need to be effective, and they need to be efficient. But because we pull all of these debates into a useless and needless political sphere, and we start talking about them with ideology and demagoguery, we cannot actually get to the thoughtful regulations because of stop global whining and not actually attacking global warming.
I'm Cynthia Redwine with the American Lung Association, and through this discussion of a sustainable energy future, I've heard underpinnings of social responsibility and sustainability, economic viability, but as in the air quality discussion, I believe that every one of those decisions has to have a basis in public health. Somebody asked who's going to pay for these innovations. Well, if the innovations don't happen in a way that is putting our health first, every one of us is going to pay with our own health and with that of our children.
Do we have a hard time, I think, explaining to people this correlation? If you get cancer and you have asthma, you don't really know for sure that you got it because you live in Houston, Texas. And I think that's one of the challenges, is that we hear it's bad for us, but we don't feel it. We get the disease eventually, but so what do we need to know about it?
One of the things I think that we need to think about is that there is an epidemic of chronic disease. Chronic diseases that take a lifetime to develop. In many cases, we have low weight babies, we have premature babies. These babies will have health problems their entire lives, all the way until hypertension, diabetes, obesity, cancer, and we aren't thinking of that. And just recently I served on the President's cancer panel, and they came out very strongly saying we need to think about the precautionary principle, and that applies to innovation, it applies to how we live our lives. We don't need to be putting out bisphenol A and things into our products that we then pull back because we didn't check for them first. And now we're finding out they're endocrine disruptors, and they're causing birth defects on our children. And those birth defects, whether it's whatever sort of gender bending or whatever it might be, lasts a lifetime. So in many cases, we are jumping into, I'm a big proponent of technology, but we're jumping into products, we're driving antibacterials when they're bad for us. I mean, all this kind of stuff, we're letting industry sort of jump ahead without thinking about what this is going to have, the long-term effect it's going to have on public health, and public health then drives education. And without an educated populace in Houston, we don't have anywhere to go.
Can you add what you said about breastfeeding, because I thought that was very interesting.
Well, there's a new study out. which just came out from the American Association of Pediatrics, and basically the gist of it is that if mother, or most mothers, 90% of mothers in America breastfed exclusively the first 6 months of their child's life, we would reduce sudden infant death syndrome, asthma, diabetes. It's $13 billion in health savings just because a baby needs mother's milk, not cow's milk, to start out, if at all possible, because that's where immunity starts. That's where they get their best start. And we aren't doing that.
Well,
so that's an environmental factor, no?
I have to thank my mom for breastfeeding me. But that's a very, very good information. Go ahead.
I'm Michael Fedland, president of Armor Glass International, and I want to emphasize the area that we haven't really talked much about, and that's conservation. The U.S. is 5% of the world's population. We consume 30% of the energy. If we just conserved energy, and that's what my company does, we could actually cut back the number of power plants we build for the next 15 years. And because there's so much fat in our efficiency that just by thinning that out and by adding more renewables, solar, wind, et cetera, we could get away from the dirty coal and the other things that are out there. We haven't really focused on it. There's a lot of unawareness in the community even about energy efficiency. That is here, it's now, it's available, but we haven't really pursued it. We use more energy in the U.S. than 2 European houses or 4 Asian houses. That should give you a pretty good idea of how much we're using and how much we could still have the same lifestyle, but by making some additions to our housing so it's more of an energy efficient, we could basically have the lifestyle without burning as much power.
Thank you. Laura Blackburn?
A couple of comments. We talked earlier about the cost of health care. That's one of the it's a difficult thing to quantify. However, EPA has made some advances in that regard. Similarly, it's difficult to quantify the total amount of energy for electric cars. I support electric cars, but if we're going to get the electricity from coal power plants, I have a problem.
Interesting. Mr. Crossley.
David Crossley, Houston Tomorrow. The other side of regulation and so forth is thinking about how we already use public policy to waste energy and to cause more emissions. So we're talking about spending $6 billion to build another loop around the city so we can develop that land out there. We're talking about spending $9 billion to make 2 of our freeways get bigger and go further so we can develop that land out there so people can drive farther and spend more money and emit more when we can't find enough money to build a transit system so that people don't have to do that and so that our neighborhoods can be walkable and filled with the amenities that people need all the time. They can walk, they can ride bikes, kids could walk to school, but we're not doing that. We're using public policy to make things much worse.
Is it because it's more interesting to make money than to save money, maybe? Because really, conservation is about saving money, and you're making money by saving money, but people don't look at it that way. Yes.
Mike Zutek, president of Wintellect, Wind Energy R&D. And we wanted to talk about solutions, so I just wanted to point out that here in Texas, we have over 10 gigawatts right now of wind energy. That's more than 3 times as much the state that's in second place, which is California. And one of the things that I'd like to have us talk about is how we're going to be able to continue to have Texas provide the infrastructure, so not just wind, but other renewables, can continue to grow very rapidly as a part of our energy mix.
Very good.
Just on electric cars, I just wanted to make a comment that I agree that is a concern, particularly the way the grid and the way our systems are set up today. But the future is very close, and the idea is to not have these cars actually being charged, if we could have millions of electric cars on the road, when there are peak times, when people are in the morning and early evening. The idea is to have smart cars and smart technology where you're able to charge these cars when nobody is using energy that's already been built for the peak. So the idea is to not have, you're not going to be building more plants to power these electric cars. You're going to be using capacity that's not being used at all, and hopefully even reduce it. And the other idea is to hopefully someday have actually cars that can be powered by renewable energy sources. As was said earlier, there's a ton of wind in Texas. It's not being used at night. We could actually have, if those cars are being charged in the middle of the night when no one's using the wind energy, you could have your car being charged by wind. That's the future.
My name is Tony Cavan. I'm an environmental lawyer here in Houston. Many of the things have been discussed today, talking about a vast expansion of regulatory power at the federal and state level. I think we'll know Tuesday whether or not the American public has any stomach for it. And I think people have to bear that in mind.
Right over here.
Yes, Laverne Williams, Environment Associates Architects here in Houston. This is directed towards Winnie Hamilton because I know she knows a lot more about it. But we've heard some discussion about nanotechnology being the solution for being a solution to the energy industry, but I'm hearing some interesting medical consequences of nanotechnology in that it has the ability to pass through the placenta and it's so small it can be damaging to not only human beings but the environment and so forth. And I'm just wondering what nanotechnology is it this placenta? I mean, not the placenta, but is this the solution that we're hearing about, or is there or precautionary principles should be employed?
Mr. Ulrich, please.
Yeah, you're right about nanotechnology's application not only in energy but also in life sciences. In fact, nanospectral biosciences is using gold nanoshells to attack cancer that will make chemotherapy obsolete when it's successful. There's also a company called Nanotox and a couple of other organizations that are looking at the negative aspects of nanotechnology as it flows through the body. So right now what we see is rich, robust opportunities for nanotechnology to make a difference, but at the same time we've got people that are carefully looking at the potential negative impacts to see if we can determine what they are in advance.
Kelly Frails, Center for Houston's Future. Our political process has really stymied the creation of a national will or a national objective that we can all get behind and develop. And I would like to hear from the panel members what they think the role of science is and medicine is in creating this national will to come up with an overall approach that overcomes the inability of our politicians to come together, and whether that's a possibility in their minds.
As a scientist, I can tell you that it doesn't much matter these days.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean?
If you I have a real problem. One of my favorite topics is climate change. The science is there, but people talk about, do you believe in it? Do you not believe in it? It doesn't have anything to do with belief. The science is there. You either accept the science or you don't accept the science. So in this political generation where nobody cares about science, you got to be careful.
And that gets right back to it. The politics are killing the science. And
that's right.
Tony, to get back to you, the election on Tuesday is not going to be decided about regulations. It's going to be decided about jobs. That's what people care about. It's a very small amount of people who really comprehend what regulation's about. And I don't think anybody here wants more regulations for regulation's sakes. I've gone on record many times saying we have enough rules on the books in Texas to do all of the job we need to do very well if we actually use those rules effectively. And the ones that don't work, they don't work because they're probably too dense and too much regulation. But we can't have the discussion about making regulations effective and efficient because it keeps getting flicked into the political ring.
And they're supposed to be solved. But I would throw out as well that I agree with Laura about science. Science has gotten so politicized that I think it's very hard. The IPCC was really a mediation concept where you brought scientists from all over the world, and it was basically discarded by the politics of the American system. So until we address this political issue, I think science is not the solution, unfortunately.
I'm not sure I agree. I think that the scientists have a responsibility to help overcome the political inability of our folks to agree. You look at a whole lot, I've worked in a whole lot of different areas of clean air. And once we have gotten the scientists together and really focused on what science has produced, even the politicians agree. But I think that I agree about the politicization of the science. But I think it's up to our scientists to stand strong and not be pushed around by the politicians.
Are you being pushed around by the politicians, Dr. Hamilton?
Speechless. I will say, this relates to politics and in the system and the policy of medicine in which what pays is sick people. So if you're a doctor, the only way you can make it is if you have people that keep coming back and are sick all the time. Our system's not set up to reward prevention or staying healthy or like healthy communities where we have a community. I mean, we need to get some common sense in here. What you don't want to do is live your life aimed at a liver transplant. I mean, that just isn't good economic policy. It isn't good health policy. It isn't good any sort of policy, but that's the way our system is set to reward liver transplants. What you want to do is live in a walkable community that has green space, that has a social safety net, where you have clean air, clean water, good schools, where everybody gets at least through high school. We don't have any dropouts. And then we have a future. Future isn't liver transplants or a kidney transplant.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. Outside the politics for a split second, when we're talking about, if it's globally, we're talking about Kyoto Protocol. If it's local, it's politicians trying to figure out who scores the brownie points and who doesn't. I happen to believe or fall on that side who think solutions for global environment is not a mutually exclusive issue. We can have the business make their money, and we can still protect the environment. I believe that we can have that. It can coexist. Now, the tricky thing is that we assume, or my takeaway from many conversations is that instead of focusing on the input controls, we worry about the output controls, because I don't think you can tax a business all the way to fixing the problem. We have to figure out innovative and creative ways to fix the problem before the problem even exists. Instead of slapping a tax on them and hopefully they will regulate it themselves. It doesn't work. And I think that's the fundamental premise is that conversation that we lost.
You want to respond to that?
Yeah, no, I think your point is well taken. And what I've heard in this whole discussion is the important issues that we all care about relating to the environment, relating to clean air, relating to being around. What I haven't heard enough about is how much we value the jobs, except by the comment that the election is going to be decided by jobs. I've heard the word balance made by several people, and I've heard people then ignore the word balance. As we need all of the things that people have talked about here, but we need it in such a way that it preserves and grows our economy. I love the way that we have regulated the shipbuilding industry. Which, of course, we haven't had many fatalities in actual ships in the United States in a long, long time because we don't have a shipbuilding industry anymore because we over-regulated it. Now, in terms of the positive side of things, someone asked before, how can they get involved? And there are some organizations that don't take strident positions but take balanced views at these things. For example, John Hofmeister, Citizens for Affordable Energy. John, a former oil executive, is not taking any money from the oil companies to put together a totally grassroots organization to look at the balance between environmental issues, technical issues, innovation, and of course, affordable energy so our economy doesn't go into tank. The Energy Collaborative at the Greater Houston Partnership is a place for big businesses to come together and deal with those issues. Your sponsor, the Institute for Houston's Future, is a great place for a non-strident, objective conversation about the long-term future. And of course, those of us at the Houston Technology Center, we're the right place for people with a technology interest in seeing the technology grow.
Thank you.
I have got to respond to Kelly. It's not the scientists who have to step up. It's each and every one of us and who we elect that will solve the problem. Yes.
And let me throw out, I'm talking about regulation in a way of being a solution to basically a stalemate that has occurred at the current time because of the horror of the oil spill incident in the Gulf of Mexico, and because of some of the problems that are beginning to show up with a lot of these different alternatives. Regulation done well is the way that these various forces can coexist. We can have a society, we can have an environment, we can have jobs, because we can all agree that it's being done in a well-run manner. It's when things are not regulated, when you start having the horrible consequences, in my opinion, that you really run the risk of your economy falling apart.
Yeah, actually, I'd like to sort of shed a tone of optimism that I think we're overestimating the power of politicians. Let me just give you one striking.
I like this already.
Yeah. One striking figure. Since August 2008, when basically the Houston economy went into recession, the medical center has added 8,500 jobs. That's 3 times or probably 4 times as much as the oil and gas industry has added. It's the largest single sector addition of jobs in this whole area. And what? Getting sicker? No. Actually, my point here is, the point I'm trying to make is that politicians have not been able to stop that. And the reason why those jobs have been created is that again, it goes back to the issue of critical mass. It's a partnership that has developed. There's a critical mass of people that has developed over there, which is delivering something that is valued by the community. And because it's being valued by the community, there is now a sort of partnership between the community and this medical center. And I can't believe that there's no politician who can stop that. And we've seen that because you have 8,500 jobs being added. And that's my point. I think we're overestimating the power of politicians. It's really that if we get each sort of empowered at the individual level through knowledge, that's our biggest defense against politicians.
I want to respond to that. The politicians can get in the way of that. They can prevent that. The state of Texas, in I believe it was 2008, created more jobs than the rest of the country, the other 49 states together. Part of your success becomes the state of Texas has managed its economy. I won't disagree there are other things they might want to manage in a different way, but in terms of our economy, we have a healthy economy that enables that kind of success. They could sink the economy and you wouldn't have that success.
This is just a sort of small point, but it has to do with sort of how everything is interconnected and what you said. In the medical community, a lot of us are realizing right now that when we go into these disadvantaged communities, they may have pollution problems, but what they need most usually is a job. If you don't have a job, everything else falls apart. Or if you have a family of 4 and you have $14,000 a year. So we're working in these communities to try to get educated children and get people reading and get better jobs, because without that you can't have your health either. I mean, it does all interconnect.
And so many of these jobs have been created in Texas over the past decade at the same time that we have spent billions of dollars making the environment better. It's a false choice to say you either choose the environment or you choose jobs. We have spent countless hours and billions of dollars making the environment better while we get to give statistics to Rick Barry's political ads.
Go ahead.
Jen Powis with Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign, and really to follow up on that and follow up on Jim's comment earlier, and to counter some of the anti-regulation or that there's too much regulation or that we need balance statistics. You know, someone brought up shale gas development and hydraulic fracturing in Pennsylvania ruining people's water wells. Well, hydraulic fracturing is excluded from the Safe Drinking Water Act and the Clean Water Act, 2 of our pinnacle federal regulatory water acts. And so that's sort of the epitome of fairness is needed across the board for industry, so that everyone is playing by the same rules, and why regulation can be effective. And then 2, there's been a lot of requests for how people can get involved. And with Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign, we're actually creating an energy team for Houston to address these very issues on a local level in Houston.
Regulation's obviously important. I think mandates, I know that seems to be somewhat of a negative word in Houston, maybe in Texas, but I actually think they can help promote things that not only save businesses money, but create jobs and also help the environment. For example, a few years ago, the city of Houston mandated for city of Houston buildings that all new buildings had to be silver LEED certified. And what started was a dialogue about greening your office buildings. And in Houston, literally, we were not on the map when it came to green buildings as late as 2007. All of a sudden, because the community was educated, understood how it could save money, create jobs, create wonderful working environments for all these young professionals that are coming to Houston, because we're the #1 city for young professionals. Literally in the last 2 years, we now have 90 LEED certified buildings and growing, and we're 8th in the country for LEED certified buildings and 6th in the country for Energy Star rated buildings. So it's a perfect example of government leading by example, educating private industry about how you can can do this, save money, and actually attract people who want to come to Houston and work for you. And that's what we should be encouraging more of.
Good government, bad government.
You know, there's a term or a concept that sort of ties all these things together in terms of solution, and it's about localism. It's the idea, for instance, that we fly lettuce in here from Australia, enormous energy costs and enormous emissions costs. We drive trucks from Mexico and California to get our food. Could we grow our own food here? Well, of course we can. We have some of the greatest, we were founded as a farming community, you know. We have some of the greatest prime farmland in America. So that's just one thing. We have some more small manufacturing jobs here than any other city. Can we do small things to not have to use energy, to not have to go way out into the world to get all the things? Do we have to have this enormous pipeline from China here to keep us alive? We don't.
And I would like to make the point that regulation, good regulation, as Jim Blackbird wants, combined with enforcement can lead to the kind of innovation that Praveen Kumar wants. Because if you actually regulate the flowback water from hydraulic fracturing, which often has a lot of pollutants in it from the fracturing fluids, you will get GE, and there was a fellow over there who was in the desalinization business, creating jobs in Pennsylvania and in Texas that cleans up the water and actually lets you recycle it or actually reuse it in other places. And those jobs can't be sold in China. They will be here cleaning up. The oil and gas industry is not job intensive. It is extremely capital intensive. There are not that many jobs, and they're kind of high-powered jobs. But conservation can create a lot of jobs. It can have people insulating attics. It can have the people who need just technical training. They don't want to be a lawyer, for God's sakes. There are jobs there in construction and in solar panels. There are jobs in the wind industry for people who like to work with their hands. And it's those kinds of jobs that Houston can provide a lot of, if the price signals are right. So no one has really brought up the whole climate change thing, which is really important. And the oil and gas industry for a while supported a climate change bill that was reasonable. Unfortunately, it got all sorts of stuff tacked onto it. But the most important signal to give to consumers to get innovation and to get technology is that there's a price on carbon, that carbon is bad. And yes, John Hofmeister is kind of right about high prices lead to lower loss of jobs, but it's largely price spikes that lead to lower jobs. I'm a law professor, but I used to be an economist. And it's uncertain price spikes from imported oil shooting up and various things like that cause a lot of unemployment and problems. But if you had a reasonable price on carbon that climbed slowly over the years, that sent signals to all of those innovators that are getting created over there at Bauer, and lawyers who knew how to enforce the rules that can make sure the flowback water gets cleaned up, we could have a good economy and good jobs and good regulation, and people would stop yelling at each other.
That's right. And we wouldn't have so many lawyers, as you said.
If you would have a tax on carbon like you're suggesting, and that drives industry, the expense for industry in the United States higher, but at the same time, they have coal liquefaction plants going up like crazy in China. There are coal liquefaction plants going up in India. And those people are not signing up to the protocols that you're wanting United States to sign up to, the Kyoto Protocol, etc. So you're not achieving, you're sort of knocking U.S. industry out to the side and letting those people take over, whilst at the same time, the wind and the climate is still going to be going all over the world. It's not going to stay in China over China. And one more thing, if you create an atmosphere, a climate for alternative sources of energy, then you will see that small businesses will get into it. For example, right now in Central Texas, the very first biomass plant is going up, which is going to be generating electricity using wood waste, etc. And a second one is going up again in Texas. So there'll be 2 biomass plants in Texas. Then you can capture carbon, feed it into algae, and you're getting biodiesel out of it. So you have solutions which are renewable. Sorry.
Since we have a very short time, can you talk about algae, because that has been brought up by many as a biofuel?
Yes, algae seems to be an excellent source of oil that you can generate. The drawback in algae seems to be that you have to grow it in great numbers on vast quantities of land, or grow it in some form, but in real great numbers.
I'm going to give you 10 seconds, 15.
Okay, the question of carbon inequality will make ourselves uncompetitive. Tax products at the border that aren't under the same law as we are, and you can solve that.
We have to end it there. I'm so sorry. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. Thank you. Good night.